we expect at least a 10 million loss of job in the month of May. By the end of the month, we are hoping things will improve, but they didn't, they worsened. And when the final numbers came out for May, we found that the numbers were 15 million job losses.
There has been a steady secular decline in salaried jobs. Could you tell us what that means?
Salaried jobs at the lower end, essentially in small and medium enterprises, is slowly and steadily but regularly shrinking.
You didn't believe that people graduating from college would have found work last year. What does it look like now?
So now you have got two cohorts, the young men and women who graduated in 2020 and 2021, who are going to compete for jobs if they become available in 2022.
But of all of the things that are going on in our country, one of the things we need to focus on most of all is jobs. Now, just yesterday, we brought you a story of the numbers released by the Center for Monitoring Indian Economy, or CMIE. Yesterday's story said that in the month of May, 10 million Indians, or 1 crore Indians, have lost their jobs. That number has been revised as of this morning to 1.5 crore Indians, or 15 million Indian citizens who've lost their job in just 1 month. Now, you add that to the numbers in April, which is about 7.5 million, and we're talking about 22 million jobs lost in the second wave of COVID. What does this really mean? Who are the people who've lost their jobs? Will they get their jobs back? What happens to the new people who graduated from college, who are now hitting the workforce looking for jobs? What's going to happen to them? To help us understand all of that, Mr. Mahesh Vyas, the CEO of CMIE, joins us right now. Mr. Vyas, thank you so much for making time for us and having this conversation with us. My first question is this revision of data. It's a sharp revision from yesterday to today. How does this revision happen? How does the data get collected, and what caused this massive revision?
It's actually a revision of our expectation. It is not a revision of an estimate. What happens is that we monitor the Indian households, the well-being of the Indian households on a continuous basis. We make measurements of various kinds. We make a monthly estimate. We also make weekly estimates, and we make a 30-day moving average estimate. The idea is to not wait till all the data comes in and then we tell you what's happening, but to give you an idea of what to expect. So we found out that in the month of May, the numbers were deteriorating regularly. Every week we saw a deterioration. So in the week ended May 23rd, we saw that the unemployment rate had shot up to 14.7%, urban had gone up to 17%, and so on and so forth. So when we saw these numbers and saw it deteriorating, we tried to translate the impact of these numbers in terms of jobs. And what we said then is that we expect at least a 10 million loss of job in the month of May. By the end of the month, we are hoping things will improve, but they didn't, they worsened. And when the final numbers came out for May, we found that the numbers were 15 million job losses. That's a weekly sample is of about 1,100 households, whereas a monthly sample is for about 42,000 households or 43,000 households. Sample is much bigger, and therefore it is a lot more reliable. And therefore the number is 15 million compared to an expected number of 10 million.
Right, so we'll put that up on the screen, and this is the bar graph going weekly through the month of May. So for the week ended May 9th, you'll see it was 8.7% of unemployment. A week later, it became 14.5. The week after that, it became 14.7. So that's a sharp increase in those last 2 weeks, which Mr. Vyas is referring to. Last year, in May, incidentally, we saw numbers that were really, really bad. 23% unemployment, which basically meant that at least 1 in 5 people was unemployed in India among the adults. Close to 1 in 4 people, which is a terrible number. Is that where we're headed right now? Do you expect this to get worse before it gets better?
I don't expect it to get any worse now.
Okay.
I think the worst is behind us. The numbers for the last week of May weren't as bad as the previous week, number one. Number two, the 30-day moving average has also inched a bit down, scaled a little bit down, just by a thin, wafer thin number. But nevertheless, it's not rising anymore. And that's what is very helpful to know. It looks like the worst is behind us. And there are many reasons why. The Kharif crop is expected to be good, so people will go back to farming activities. And the pandemic has also kind of started to abate a little bit. The fear has gone down a little bit. So on the margin, things are improving. They are not great. This is not a great place to be in, but it's not getting any worse.
Well, that's good to know. The jobs that we're talking about, these 22 million jobs that have been lost over the course of 2 months, April and May, are these largely informal jobs or formal jobs? Because we saw this happen last year when the informal jobs, when the lockdown opened last year, the people who had daily wage informal jobs got those jobs back. So what proportion of this 22 million jobs are informal jobs?
A very large proportion. So when you have a lockdown, when you clamp down on people's mobility, when hawkers cannot come out, when plumbers and masons and the rest of them cannot stand on the curb looking for work, you're basically putting a lot of people out of work who are informally employed and they are daily wage laborers. So this time in April and May, 22.7 million jobs were lost, of which 17 million jobs are of daily wage earners. So that's a fairly high proportion. Something similar happened in April, May 2020 as well. So this is a replay of the same thing. When you clamp down, when you shut down mobility, the daily wage earner is the one who gets hit. If you lift it, these people will go back to work and they will be engaged in the labor markets.
So that would leave us with about 50 lakh salaried jobs that have been lost in the last 2 months, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, no. So the math doesn't work that way. So there are people who come in and people who go out. So 17 million jobs lost amongst daily wage earners. Another 5 million jobs were lost by business people. So small entrepreneurs, people who are running small factories, maybe workshops, all of them also lost jobs. There were gains in the agricultural sector.
Okay.
So the Kharif crop, preparations for the Kharif crop, we have 2 crops in India, the Rabi crop and the Kharif crop. The Kharif crop preparations begin in May, and that's where people have gone. So on a net basis, we had 15.3 million job losses in May and 22.7 in April and May. But it's not that you can add individually. Some of them get jobs, some of them lose jobs.
You have said in your report that there has been a steady secular decline in salaried jobs. Would you tell us what that means? What does that term mean?
So what happens is that when you have a lockdown, daily wage earners lose their job immediately. And many of them move to the farms, and you see an increase in farmers. So people just say we are working on the farms. Salaried jobs are different. They are lost when enterprises shut down or scale down. And what we have been seeing is that slowly and steadily, since April of 2020, we have been seeing slowly and steadily the salary jobs being lost. So this is like every month a little more hit, every month a little more hit. Sometimes a little bigger hit, sometimes a little smaller hit, sometimes no change. But this seems to be a steady fall. So which means I think in the month of April, we saw a lot of salary jobs being lost in rural India, large amounts, 5 million salary jobs lost in rural India. These were MSMEs shutting down. When medium and small enterprises shut down, there are blue-collar workers over there. There are other salaried employees working in those enterprises. They've all lost their jobs. So it's hotel and tourism and travel and so on and so forth, which are the known things. But there's also the MSME, which are also in rural India, which are getting hit. So salary jobs are getting lost persistently because of the lockdown, because of the slowdown, because of the economic hit that we are seeing, because industries aren't investing. If they don't invest, they will not find new jobs, and the existing ones are shrinking. Larger companies are getting the market share of the smaller companies, and the smaller companies, which are more labor intensive, are shutting down. So salary jobs at the lower end, essentially in small and medium enterprises, is slowly and steadily but regularly shrinking.
What would happen if we are unable to stem that bleeding that you just talked about of salary jobs that are slowly and steadily shrinking?
Not good things happen then. If people lose jobs, it's obviously very bad. It's particularly bad because, and I don't like to do this stereotyping, but nevertheless, it's important for us to understand what's happening. And pardon me if I am stereotyping a bit. Salary jobs are good jobs. They're good quality jobs because they give you some social security. I mean, we have our Provident Fund cut. There may be a gratuity piling up for us. There could be leaves which we can get. Paid leaves are available, and so on and so forth. Daily wage earners are not so good jobs. You don't have any social security. You have no paid leaves. You don't come to work, you don't earn. So it's important for us to save our salaried jobs. If we are losing them, it's a very bad thing to happen to the economy. It's a very bad thing to happen to households. And that's what matters in the economy. The economy is the people. And if the households are losing good quality jobs, then it's a terrible thing to happen. Even if employment comes back, if it comes back in the form of gig workers, it's not a good thing. It's a fashionable term today, but not a good thing at all. So it's very important to save salaried jobs.
So to explain, I mean, again, this is really simplistic for our audience. So again, I beg your indulgence in this. Effectively, someone who had a salaried job, who would have then had paid leave, who would have had health insurance, who would have had sick days, who would have had Provident Fund, money set aside there, would have lost his job. And if he comes back as an Ola driver, he would technically be counted as having a job, but he doesn't have any of the security and the benefits that his salary job used to give him. And so it's not the same thing. And his entire family is more vulnerable, as we have seen, to bad health, to hospitalization. Things like this make family incomes family savings far more vulnerable when you don't have a salaried job in that household, and that is an issue. And if I were to stretch this a little bit, and when we was having these conversations, Mr. Vyas, a couple of years ago, pre-COVID, when you had first perhaps stuck up the red flag of unemployment, far before any of this happened, the government turned around and said, we're not looking for people to get themselves employed. We want them to become self-starters. We want them, look at how many Uber drivers there are, look at how many Ola drivers there are. People are sort of putting up stalls and shops, and they're becoming self-sufficient. If we look at the numbers that you're telling us now, you're telling us that a lot of those self-sufficient small enterprises have in fact closed. Is that correct?
That's right. So those were very small enterprises. Many people are taking up entrepreneurship, not because they were entrepreneurs, but because entrepreneurship was thrust upon them. Thrust in the form of, say, there are government packages to say that we would like to train you to start a small factory or a workshop somewhere. Or it was thrust because you didn't have a job. You went from door to door and tried to get a job, you got nothing. So then what do? You set up your stall outside and try to make a living in some way or the other. So, or you become a gig worker. So you say that today I'm a photographer somewhere, tomorrow I am something else somewhere, and I claim that I am employed. This is a problem. This is not the way the country should be going. People should be yearning, and most people, when they are young and still schooling, and they're, let us say, in the 12th grade, or they have gone to college, they yearn to work for a large company. They yearn to work for, the Tatas and the Birlas and the and so on and so forth, and the Googles and the Facebooks of the world. They start a small shop at the curb. So it's important to understand what the people want. The people don't want to be entrepreneurs. They want to work. They want experience. Maybe after 10, 15, 20 years, they aspire to have their own enterprise after they have got some experience. But it's not that I step out of school and start my own business. That's not going to happen. So the country has to provide good quality jobs where I know how human resource management is done, where I know how processes are managed, where I know how supply chain is managed, and so on and so forth. I can't start off without knowing all these things from a large firm first.
Mr. Vyas, your numbers or your report also analyzes a correlation between unemployment and the workforce participation. What does that tell us about the new people joining the workforce on an annual basis? Because we have people graduating from school, from college, then going out to look for jobs. And when we spoke last year, you said that was a depressing question to answer because you didn't believe that people graduating from college would have found work last year. So which means that there's a backlog of that year, and now we have a fresh year. What does it look like now?
It's very depressing. So, I don't have to give out numbers for this. What happened to all those young men and women who graduated in 2020? They didn't find jobs. There were none in the market. Many of them said, we will continue studying, or they just sat at home doing nothing. What happens to the people who will graduate in 2021? So now you have got two cohorts. The young men and women who graduated in 2020 and 2021, who are going to compete for jobs if they become available in 2022. Imagine the mayhem in the labor markets. Imagine how competitive it will be. And the sad story over here, Faye, which is very depressing, is that if a person doesn't get a job, the person is blamed, not society. So you don't get a job because you don't study hard enough, because you don't work hard enough, because you don't try hard enough. Prepare more, work harder. See, that guy got the job, you didn't get a job. So there's going to be mental stress on people not getting jobs without households recognizing that there is a macroeconomic problem that has fallen upon us, which is causing people not getting jobs. So I think we need to take cognizance of the fact that there are two cohorts which will compete with the third one in 2022 if jobs come back by then, which also looks very difficult to me.
So that was going to be my next question. If let's say, God willing, because we have nothing else to pin our hopes on at this point, we managed to get on top of this virus through vaccines and all of these other things, and lockdowns are no longer the case next year. Will that mean the jobs that have been lost will come back? Because the stalls can open again, the daily wage laborers can go back to work, but will that mean the same thing for everyone?
Will the jobs come back is dependent upon will enterprise invest. If Mr. Entrepreneur does not set up a new factory, or doesn't expand an existing factory, or doesn't expand her markets into new areas, then she is not going to hire more people. So we have to ask the question, are entrepreneurs going to invest more or not? The answer to that is, there is no good reason why they should be investing. If they invest, we should question their intelligence, because they are currently sitting on excess capacities. Their capacity utilization was an abysmal 66% by RBI's survey, which was also before the second wave hit us. So presumably that capacity utilization has dropped even more. If they've got excess capacity, why are they going to create new capacity? So we have a little hope that when the new capacities start chugging, they will hire more people. That will hopefully take us back to where employment was before the COVID hit us. But more people have come into the labor markets or are waiting to come into the labor markets. What about them? It will take a long time before industry adds capacity to absorb that additional labor that has come into the market.
Mr. Vyas, we know that our vaccine drive in the country has slowed down tremendously, almost by half. We're vaccinating half as many people on a daily basis today than as we were doing in the beginning of April. The government has told us everyone will be vaccinated by the end of December, but there's no roadmap, there's no plan of how that is going to happen. If they were, in the chance that there is a third wave, scientists are warning there could be, and there are further lockdowns, what impact will that have on our job market?
No, that will be too bad. So it will be just too bad, and I hope it doesn't happen. The economy has taken a very bad beating. We just can't afford a third wave. It's very important that we vaccinate enough numbers and don't let lives be lost or livelihoods be lost. Because the GDP numbers don't capture the real stress in the Indian economy. Even the employment numbers don't capture it enough. People get jobs which are worse than the earlier jobs. So counting employment is hardly helpful. What is important is to see how many people are falling below the poverty level. How much is inequality increasing to an extent that it stresses people? Those things are important. Has gotten worse, has gotten quite bad. Amit Basole, Rosa Abraham from Azim Premji University have done some excellent work making those estimations. And it looks so bad. I hope we don't have a third wave and we are prepared in the eventuality that it does strike us, that our health systems are better prepared to deal with it. We shouldn't say we are surprised. And the economy is not as weak as it is currently.
Okay. All right, Mr. Vyas, thank you so much for speaking with us and answering most of our questions today. It's been a pleasure as always to speak with you.
Thank you.